Last week, we walked through several Bible texts and considered the Adventist health message. I want to just briefly address some texts that are troublesome and give short explanations. Those texts have profound explanations and backgrounds in Greek and Hebrew. I don't want to do that. I want to show you that if we read Scripture and look at the context and use some common sense. Whatever happened to that, right? That we can figure this out. Plus, I'll sprinkle a few Ellen White quotes here and there, but they're not too hard to figure out. The first text we want to ponder is an obvious one, Genesis chapter 9, verse 3, where it looks like God says you can eat anything you want. Genesis chapter 9, verse 3. Right after the flood, God tells, not Moses yet, Noah, every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. Sounds like pig, pork, shrimp, lobster, la cucaracha. Little peanut butter. It's what the text says. Shall be for food for you. I've given you all things, now watch this, even as the green herbs, which were our food originally in creation, a vegan diet. What do we do with that? It's all given to us. Let me illustrate. If I gave my boys a $5 bill, got their attention. They're like, what happened to the $20 bill? But if I gave them a $5 bill and we just got our haircuts near the H-E-B in Burleson, and I say, run in there and get yourself a treat. You can get anything you want. Now, they're Seventh-day Adventist boys. They grow up in a preacher's home, and I'm telling them, you can buy anything you want as a treat. Here's $5. Do you think they would walk out finally with a nice lobster? That wouldn't work for $5, but what do you think? Some shrimp? A bag of coffee? No? Some candy? Some ice cream? Possibly. Now, wait a minute. I told him you can buy anything you want. There is a baseline assumption behind the word everything within a specific context. And the Bible was written for practical purposes. And if my boys turned around and said, so Dad, can we finally get that lobster and crunch on that sidearm? I would say, of course not. Even though I told them you can buy anything you want. Now, in the context of Genesis, what happened to the green herbs? Destroyed. They still had to plant a garden like in Papua New Guinea in the children's story. Ellen White had it figured out, Ministry of Healing 3:11, the diet, quote, appointed man in the beginning did not include animal food. Not until the flood, when every green thing on the earth had been destroyed, did man receive permission to eat flesh foods. In choosing man's food in Eden, the Lord showed what was the best diet. In the choice made for Israel, he taught the same lesson. We're going to talk about the fish in a second. He brought the Israelites out of Egypt and undertook their training that they might be a people for his own possession. Through them, he desired to bless and teach the world. Mission and health ministries and food tied together. He provided them with food best adapted for this purpose, not flesh, but manna, the bread of heaven. It was only because of their discontent and their murmuring for the flesh pots of Egypt that animal food was granted them, and this only for a short time. Its use brought disease and death to thousands, yet the restriction to a non-flesh diet was never heartily accepted. It continued to be cause of discontent and murmuring, open or secret, and it was not made permanent. But Jesus ate fish. What do you do with that? Jesus ate fish after the resurrection. We normally say, well, we eat what was readily accessible. good explanation. That's what Jesus had to eat there, and so that's what he ate. Let me point out a couple other things. If people argue, well, Jesus ate fish, therefore we can eat fish too. Follow this argument to its logical conclusion. Jesus never married. He also walked on water. He walked everywhere, never used electricity, never got married, and died through crucifixion at age around 33. Only spoke Hebrew and Aramaic, maybe a little Greek, possibly knew Latin as well because of the Roman Empire. Do we all need to become carpenters? If you say, well, Jesus ate fish, therefore, then let's include all the other items as well. Did you walk to church? But let me point out something else. And somebody showed me that last week, and I was going there with the second part, death at the dinner table, food for thought. When Jesus ministered on earth, he was practically, theologically operating outside the courtyard, or even in the courtyard. He was not operating in the holy place, or as after 1844 in the most holy place. Now think about this, health message. Is that just to be healthy? No, we read last week, it's to be holy. What was in the most holy place? Well, you got the Ark of the Covenant with the Ten Commandments, of course, a transcript of his character. You got Aaron's staff or rod and a pot of manna. Could it be that God is saying there's a progression in our diet from the courtyard all the way into the most holy place? And that happened during the Exodus, and our Exodus now is not from Egypt to Israel, but it's from earth to heaven. Could it be that in that pot of manna is not just a reminder of the Exodus, but a hint of the diet of the people post-1844? I'll let you chew on that all day long now, no pun intended. Think about that. Manna in the most holy place. Then we're going to jump to the New Testament and Mark chapter 7. It sounds like Jesus is cleansing all foods, and we now can eat poisonous mushrooms, pork, shrimp, lobster, and la cucaracha, which happens to be one of the 20 words I know in Spanish and used to my advantage among Hispanics. Makes them smile, and then I walk through the door into their hearts. Mark chapter 7, verse 15. There is nothing that enters a man from outside which can defile him. It's in red ink in my Remnant Study Bible. But the things which come out of him, those are the things that defile a man. Verse 19. Because it does not enter his heart, but his stomach, and is eliminated, thus purifying all foods. There it is. I grew up on all that stuff. If it had a face, a mom, I ate it. And here Jesus says, what comes out of a man that defiles a man, purifying all foods. Let me read it again. Purifying all what? All foods. A Jew would never consider the pig a food item. Number one. For example, everything, just a little detour, everything in life in the Old Testament system had a cleansing procedure. A man touches a dead body, a carcass, there's a cleansing procedure, either waiting time, a ritual washing, time outside the camp, etc., and then you were clean again. Okay? People can become unclean, and they become clean again. The pig never had any form of cleansing procedure. It could never become food. But that's not the issue in this text. Let me read you the context. My students have to read Matthew through Revelation cover to cover and then send me comments and questions. And 9 out of 10 questions I can answer by just reading the context. The disciples go to the H-E-B in Burleson. And they pick up, let's leave the pig out of the picture, they pick up a clean muffin, a blueberry muffin, okay? Now some of the ingredients in that muffin are probably not all that clean either. Let's leave shrimp, lobster, and all that out of the picture. They pick up a nice whole wheat loaf of bread. And they go outside, and in the parking lot, without washing their hands, they start eating, and the Pharisees are like, unclean. Let me read it to you. Now, when they saw some of his disciples eat bread with defiled, that is, unwashed hands, they found fault, for the Pharisees and the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands in a special way. In the hospital, you're supposed to sing happy birthday. Not until you finish singing have you washed your hands. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands in a special way. Here it is, verse 3. Holding to the tradition of the elders. The subject in Mark chapter 7 is not pork, shrimp, and lobster. Unclean foods. The subject of the passage is the tradition of the elders, and let me keep reading. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash, and there are many other things which they have received and hold, like the washing of cups, pitchers, copper vessels, couches. The Pharisees, scribes asked him, why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashed, that is, unclean hands? What Jesus cleansed that day was not pork, shrimp, and lobster. What he cleansed was hands that were, according to the Bible, clean to begin with, dealing with clean, edible foods. Are you following that? Pork is not part of the discussion, really. I'm going to explain to you the word unclean here in a minute, but we have one more text we need to consider. I won't read the whole text for the sake of time and temperature. John chapter 2, the wedding. Is it not clear that Jesus turned water into wine? And alcohol is good for your heart. That's what the studies show. I can solve the John 2 issue just by reading the context. I can tell you, we have quotes from rabbis that say that in festivities, like weddings, now they do drink alcohol now, but in festivities or any religious connotation, the wine was grape juice. But let me show you something. How does that story start? On what day does the wedding take place? On the third day. I won't take the time, I'll do it another time. But John plays with time. Third day, next day, he has 3 Passovers, next day, third day. And then he comes to the third day at the end of his gospel. Do you know what the third day is after the cross? It is the day of the resurrection. It's not an airtight case, but jump down in John chapter 2 to verse 10. The chief of the wedding feast says, every man at the beginning sets out the good wine. When the guests are well drunk, then the inferior. And then he admits this wedding is different. This wedding is different. Watch verse 11. This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee. Without much Greek, Hebrew, Jewish backgrounds, we can solve all this, but I'm going to leave all this aside. Verse 11 says the wedding was what? A sign. That means the physical activity stands for something else and symbolizes something. What do you think Jesus is symbolizing by introducing the story on the third day and then something turns into blood red liquid? What is Jesus doing here? He is illustrating at the wedding a real physical event. He's illustrating the cross and the resurrection. What came out of his body when the soldier put the spear in the side? Water and blood. What is he doing with the water at the wedding? He's turning it into blood. He's illustrating a Passover lamb sacrifice, and no Jewish Passover will ever have any form of fermentation at the Passover. Theologically, what Jesus did here had to be water into grape juice, because fermentation was not allowed during Passover feasts. Are you following all that? And he's saying, John in verse 11, this wedding was a sign, an illustration of a Passover sacrifice. Water turned into blood, somebody dies, there's a miracle, and the third day there's a resurrection. Let me just read to you briefly from Patriarchs and Prophets 361. Nadab and Abihu, they got in trouble with this alcohol. Never have committed that fatal sin had they not first become partially intoxicated by the free use of wine. Now think about this. They brought alcohol into the sanctuary, and God had to do what? Strike them. Since 1844, we again are servants before a heavenly sanctuary, and according to Leviticus 10, illustrated in this horrible disaster with alcohol, serving before the sanctuary prohibited all use of alcohol, including privately at home without getting drunk. I know that card is being played by a lot of Adventists. Well, I don't get drunk, I just drink it at home. Can't be done. You are working in front of the sanctuary, you're not allowed any alcohol. But it's good for the heart, is it? It's the purple stuff in the grape juice that's good for your heart. Do you know who sponsored those studies that say that wine is good for your heart? The liquor industry. Saying that wine is good for your heart is like saying that smoking 40 cigarettes a day is good for you. Is that true? Yes, if you've been smoking 80. Okay? It's better not to smoke at all. Better not to drink at all. So a little wine, good for your heart, has nothing to do with the alcohol content. Alcohol, we have secular studies actually show they are cancer agents, the alcohol itself. But having said that, you think how we talk about alcohol is good for your heart. When you have a bottle of liquor, do you know what is in that liquor? It is 70% plus good stuff. Water. But we don't praise the liquor. Look, it's good for you. It's got 70% water in it. It's good for you. Is water good for you? Yes, it is. But that doesn't make the liquor a good item. It's on the same level of logic. Acts chapter 10, Peter is praying, and Peter's got a problem. Now, I'm going to stereotype. Don't run from the chapel. Okay? If you do, I assume you're getting too hot. Peter is at potluck. And some illegal Mexicans without health insurance come into the church. They are invited to potluck. Now listen to this. Since we don't go as missionaries anymore, God has to send them to us. That's my politics. Okay? Peter is sitting there with his plate, and Peter sees those illegals coming in that should speak English. We are in America. Okay? Why don't they learn English? That's his attitude. He sees them come in, he picks up his plate and moves to another table. They don't speak English. They talk different. They shouldn't have come over here to begin with. But they're in church, okay? Forget the politics. God sees that and he thinks, oh, I wanted to reach them through this church and through San Pedro. I got to teach him a lesson. So while Peter is praying on the rooftop, God sends a sheet out of heaven and says, slaughter, kill, and eat. Now, I have to confess, I'm a vegetarian now. if a voice that was the voice of God said, Ingo, slaughter, kill, and eat, do you know what I would do? I would slaughter, kill, and eat. Peter has the audacity to say, no, I'm not eating that. And then Peter says something very important that you need to catch. Now, this is complex, but follow me. Peter says what precisely in Acts chapter 10? I've never eaten anything what? Common or unclean. So now you got two categories. Now follow me. I know it's after 12 and it's 1. Common means a clean animal that is right next to an unclean pig. Could the clean animal, the chicken, the pollo, could the chicken still be eaten by Peter? Yes. It's a clean meat. Peter could eat the chicken. God says slaughter, kill, and eat. What I think is happening is God illustrating that he's considering the Mexicans chickens. They are clean people, but now that he's coming in contact with them and he thinks they're unclean, he can no longer eat anything. And he says, God, I can't eat that. And God says 3 times, slaughter, kill, and eat. He could have eaten the clean chicken, which Peter thought is common, not unclean. Okay? Then that happens 3 times, Peter doesn't eat. In verse 28, it dawns on him, he called fellow human beings unclean. And God taught him the lesson, and he finally got it and changed the church. They were no longer illegal Mexicans that should have learned English. They were what? Fellow human beings that ought to be one with the gospel. Okay? Forget politics. They're fellow human beings. And Peter realizes, I should not call anybody common or unclean, but Peter could have eaten the common ones, the chicken that's next to the pig. That was that phase in the ministry of the church. I know this is a little complicated, but that's the nutshell. Romans 14, I'm just telling you, Paul calls vegetarians weak. Has nothing to do with the health message. There were at the grocery store people who dedicated the bananas to Zeus or to Satan or Lucifer. And 2 church members going to the grocery store, one said, I'm buying bananas. The other said, I'm not touching those. Those are dedicated to the devil. And Paul says, a banana is a banana. You can eat the bananas. But if it bothers your neighbor, then don't buy the bananas. And they had that issue with clean meat. So it has nothing to do really with vegetarianism or meat eating. The context is idolatry. I'm going to go to 1 Timothy 4, verse 1. I'm making it quick. 1 Timothy 4. I had a guy knock on my door where we built a house in San Antonio, and he wanted to sell me a clean water system. Now, he weighed 350 pounds and was smoking up my driveway. And I thought, I'm going to invite you in. I'm not interested in the water system. I ended up buying one. But nonetheless, I thought, I'm going to invite this guy in. He's smoking, and he wants to sell me something. Come on in, hour and a half. And we got to talking. He showed me how my pipes in my house are going to be ruined by the stuff in the water and all that. And I finally said, not quite like this, but pretty direct, then why do you not keep your pipes clean? I mean, he had to take a deep breath, and he said, what do you mean? I said, you know, I love your presentation. I appreciate it. I'm actually interested in it. But I saw you smoking up my driveway. You're ruining your own pipes, and you're selling me a system to keep my pipes clean. He said, 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 4. He quoted it in my house. He said, my pastor taught me that when I eat my pork chops and steak and all that, I do the following. 1 Timothy 4, verse 4. Well, I'll read verse 3. Forbidding to marry, commanding to abstain from foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. For every creature of God is good, and nothing is to be refused if it is received with thanksgiving. So he told me, I take the pork chops, and I thank God, and I eat them. And Paul said it's okay. Do you know what a relative clause is in English? I learned it in, I'm guessing, 6th grade. Are you smarter than a 6th grader in Germany? 1 Timothy 4, verse 3. No Greek and Hebrew and cultural background and any of that. Just read the text again. It's all it takes, really, most of the time. Forbidding to marry, commanding to abstain from foods. And there it is. Which God created we receive with thanksgiving. Pig is not a food, and the pig was not created to be received with thanksgiving. Paul qualifies that not all items on earth are created as food and to be received with thanksgiving. Morgan, it's going to be okay. One more text, and then just a few factors, a little Adventist history, and I'm done. 1 Timothy 5:23, Paul told Timothy to drink wine. I mean, you just turn the page, and there it is. I have to address this one. 1 Timothy 5:23. Plus, next week, I promise you air conditioning. Brand new units. Okay? Just one more Sabbath. 1 Timothy 5:23. In the Philippines, the temperature was another 5 to 10 degrees and double the humidity. 1 Timothy 5:23. No longer drink only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and your frequent infirmities. I mean, how do you argue with that? Let's say that Paul meant alcohol. I don't think so, and I'll prove it to you in just a minute. But let's say he did call the wine wine, and he meant alcohol. Notice some minor little detail, but it makes a huge difference, just like 5 degrees in here would make a huge difference, plus or minus. If you're listening through audio, we are in a little chapel without AC in the state of Texas, and the saints are getting warmed up. No longer drink only water. Do you know what a verb is? What is the next verb? No longer drink only water. By the way, what does Paul assume that Timothy drinks? Water. Okay. What's the next verb after the comma? Use. He does not say drink wine. He says use wine. I'm picturing he's got water. There are bugs in it, little creatures under the microscope. And Paul says drop a few drops, drip a few drops of alcohol into the cup, and it will kill the bugs. It's kind of the use of NyQuil. Okay? And by the way, there are probably better ways to deal with a cold. But he's saying use a few drops of alcohol in the water, and it will kill the bugs. We do that backpacking. My brother and I, we had these little pills. That was before the charcoal filter contraptions and all that. And then we drank the mountain water in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. I think that's what Paul is saying if he meant alcohol. But listen to this. In AD 79, which is the exact time of Paul writing this letter, same time, Pliny the Younger in Natural History, chapter 23 and 24, he recommends, quote, boiled, unfermented wine for the sick people for whom it is feared that wine may be harmful. We have a contemporary quote outside the Bible from, not from Paul. Pliny the Younger wrote a medical biology book, and he says, wine used for sick people ought to be unfermented. So what I think Paul is telling Timothy here is switch to Welch's grape juice. All right, just to encourage you with potluck here, why do we need to be cautious with milk? Milk, cow milk, is made for calves who have 4 stomachs double their weight in 47 days, and weigh 300 pounds in 1 year. Dr. Frank Hu, Harvard University, U.S. News and World Report, May 23, 2005. You notice I'm not quoting Ellen White. Says, quote, I'm actually very concerned about recommending a high dairy diet to the general public. Look at the food pyramid. Sometimes it's now changed to a plate. Still way too much dairy. The FDA further warns that they should not eat any kind of fish, that's the FDA, to pregnant women, or shellfish more than once a week. The reason, to avoid ingesting dangerous amounts of mercury, a toxin known to damage developing brains and nervous systems. My family never went fishing except for once. We were not into that. We caught some fish in the river. My mom put them in the skillet, opened them up, cleaned them out, infested with worms, little squiggly stuff. I think we had hot dogs that day. I don't know if that was any better. But the Atkins diet. The Atkins diet tacitly acknowledged that it's a deeply flawed diet. Be careful with diets. We don't need a diet. We just need a change in lifestyle and what we eat. They prescribe 60 vitamins, minerals, plants extracts, fish oil, etc. If we were to bottle the Atkins diet, it would not be sold on the shelf, one scholar says. Coffee. Just around the corner, there's a rainbow in the sky. Let's have another cup of coffee and let's have another piece of pie. According to American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, coffee and heart disease show a direct correlation. Right? Ministry of Healing, page 335. Notice what she lumps into one paragraph, one sentence. That's all I read you. In relation to tea, coffee, tobacco, and alcoholic drinks, and just for you all here in Texas, Mountain Dew, Dr. Pepper, etc. The only safe course is to touch not, she says, taste not, handle not. She lumps coffee, tea, and tobacco, and alcohol in one paragraph. Chocolate. Now, Ellen White, when she came home from Australia, she brought her kids some saltwater taffy. I'm not saying you cannot have any. I just brought some as gifts from Germany. I probably shouldn't do that anymore after this sermon. But this is high-class Lindt excellence, mild 70% cocoa German chocolate. Okay? Let me read to you. Fat, 48 grams. The thing is 100 grams, 48 grams. That's 48%. Sugar, 29%. 29 grams. So a third of chocolate is sugar. And we've also found that eating large amounts of chocolate results in a 140% calcium loss in urine, increase of oxalate 213%. Kidney stones are made out of calcium oxalate. I could go on and on. Soda, the amount of sugar, your bacteria capability, destroying bacteria capability decreases from 14 to 1 with 24 grams of sugar. American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, October 2006. What do we conclude from all this? Harris Methodist Hospital, fall 2005. I get their newsletter. If you want to avoid breast cancer, colon cancer, ovarian cancer, and I know all things being equal, it doesn't always work out like this, but they say, not Ellen White, exercise, eat healthy, stop smoking, and quit drinking alcohol. For every single cancer they list. We've known this for almost 160 years now. Health Vision in 1863. I'm going to close with 3 things. The iPod for teenagers, 2 minutes of Adventist history, and without reading any more quotes, just an Ellen White perspective here at the end, and I'm done. We'll go to the lake. Teenagers, the iPod. We have New Start. Nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine, temperance, balance in life, fresh air, rest, and trust in divine guidance. I want to add one more. There's a new phenomenon on the market now. It's called the earbud. And we have not had this the last 150 years. This is a new thing as of 10, 15 years ago. Sound was meant to swirl through the air. I got doctors sitting in here. I got to watch what I say, but I think it's true. It's meant to swirl through the air. You know, I'm talking, you're listening. It hits your outer ear, gets broken up, then it hits your middle ear, and then hits your eardrum, and then you little hair move, and then you hear what I say. That's how that works. I was a bio major. What the earbud now does is bypass sound waves, the outer ear, the middle ear, and it hits your eardrum directly at the following decibels. The library noise level in a normal library is about 30 decibel. Rainfall can be 50. A close conversation can get as loud as 60. The vacuum cleaner is 70, unless you got an Auric Excel. Busy street is 80. Lawnmower is 90 decibel. Chainsaw motorcycle is 100 decibel. The movie theater is at 118. A jet plane taking us as 120. Live rock concert, I've never been, is 130, but I have been to the amphitheater in Ephesus, Turkey, where one of the 7 churches was. Chris de Burgh had a rock concert there, and the amphitheater had to be closed because it cracked the foundation of the ancient amphitheater. It was that loud. And we couldn't go in it, Nancy and I, when we were there in 95. And then gunshot is 140 upwards. Where do you think the iPod falls at medium noise, the equivalent in decibels, on this scale? 120, jet plane taking off. In your ear several hours a day. I predict, I'm not a prophet, nor I'm a son of the prophet, but teenagers, we will have a hearing loss crisis and lawsuits against that Cupertino company in California in the next generation. Yep. So I'm throwing that in with the health message just for you to ponder. Now, having said all this, I want to close on this. I found in my own life I have to watch gross health videos more than once for me to make a lifestyle change. I have to go to health lectures more than once to take the next step. And then I slip a little, and I notice, I need to reactivate this. This does not happen overnight. In 1848, Joseph Bates, a sea captain, in 1821, that's when he gave up alcohol. 1823, tobacco. 1828, tea and coffee. 1843, vegetarian. 1845, he joined the Advent movement. How many years is that? 10, 20 years, okay? 1848, he encouraged Adventists to give up tobacco, tea, coffee. 1854, Ellen White talks about controlling the appetite. First health vision did not come till the year 1863. Marion Hadley would know. What does that tell you about us as a movement grasping the health message? Takes years, takes steps. I'm not judging anybody who's eating this and drinking that. It is progressive and it takes time. Our first healthcare institute was 1865. I have a third part that I will not share with you today, but what Ellen White does, and we did in San Antonio, was the health message was supposed to be the right arm of the gospel. What I've noticed is we've done 2 extremes. We've either just totally dismissed it as who cares about health, that's legalistic, we need to focus on Jesus, and we've chopped off the right arm. Or we have relegated the right arm only to self-supporting independent ministries. And health is now done by Heartland, Weimar, UG Pines, etc., but those are the extreme people, you know. So either we chopped off the arm, or we sent the arm to smaller groups in the wilderness. What Ellen White envisioned was the right arm of the gospel, being part of the main body of Seventh-day Adventism. So in the end here, before we sing, I make another appeal. You're not coming forward. You're not signing anything. You're not standing up like we did last week. While I'm praying, then we're singing. While you're singing, I'm changing. I'm going to the lake. I don't know where you're going after church, but I'm going to the lake. You're invited. While I'm praying here, while we're singing, quietly you in your mind, frontal lobe, that's where the health message starts, make one decision of what you want to change Sunday morning, tonight, in your refrigerator, in your pantry, at the restaurant, one thing. Exercise, you start one thing.